So the health belief model was one of the original models in behavior change coming out of the United States Public Health Services in the 1950s. And this model really tried to kind of reconcile, people know what they should be doing to be healthy, but they're not doing it. Why is that? So it started to kind of look more at what are some of the beliefs that are locked in to affecting someone's ability or desire, I should say, to change their behavior. So what they specifically argue is that our belief in the threat of an illness, so how bad is it to really get obesity? Am I really worried about becoming obese? Am I really worried about getting diabetes? Am I really worried about getting lung cancer? Plus, our belief in the effectiveness of a proposed behavior. So, okay, let's say I am worried about getting lung cancer. Is quitting smoking really going to make a difference? Well, yes. The answer is yes. But a better example here is if I really don't want to develop obesity, is physical activity really going to be effective for that? Is it actually worth the effort? Do I care enough about the risk? And do I really think that the effort of physical activity is going to make a difference? Okay, so there's several theoretical constructs to this this model, some that were part of its original iteration, and some that were added later. Added in later. Okay, so the kind of people's perceptions around their susceptibility to disease, how severe that disease is, and what are the perceived barriers and benefits to that activity. That's part of the original theoretical framework. And then certain modifying variables like demographics or race or health inequities, those can play in. Plus, is there any like cue to action, like is there something else like sparking me to do this as well? And of course, self-efficacy too. Okay, so they argued that some of those things that I just talked about are going to speak to someone's really desire desire to, but also their actual engagement. So we're not even talking about the intention here. We're talking more of, are they going to do it or not? Right? So they argued that, like I said, how susceptible people feel that they actually are to that disease. So for instance, let's go back to obesity. Obesity is a good example here. So let's say someone has just a lean figure and their family all were lean, their family never exercised and always ate a lot, but they just have lean genetics. Okay? So their perceived susceptibility to obesity is going to be really low. So if you're trying to motivate them to exercise, and they're like, but by saying like, oh, it'll reduce your risk of obesity, that's not going to do anything for them because they're like, but I'm not going to get it anyway, right? So it depends on how much they believe that they could actually develop that. And do they think it's a big deal if they do get it, right? Some people are like, well, if I get diabetes, there's drugs for that. If I get cardiovascular disease, or by the time I get cancer, there'll be a cure for it. There's people that believe these things, right? So we have to be aware of that. And of course, their perceived benefits and barriers. And things like their psychology, their demographics, these are all these modifying variables that can affect their motivation and can affect all these other things we just talked about as well. When it comes to cue to action, this might be something that actually like bypasses all the rest. So for instance, if someone maybe doesn't really care to exercise for anything else, but like all their friends have started exercising and, it's become a cool thing to do with their friend group, that is a cue to action. And I don't even have to worry about any of these other things because I kind of bypass that with a cue to action. Okay. So again, this is one of those other behavior change theories that looks at some of the reasons why people don't change. Okay, and again, as health promoters, we might want to look at that, right? So again, if we're motivating people as far as like, okay, if you do this, you're not going to get a disease, we might have to think about like, do they care? Do they actually think that engaging in this behavior is going to make a difference, right? Or maybe we have to use another behavior change model with them. So we'll look at another one, the trans-theoretical model of change, in the next module.